Max Verstappen just exposed something Red Bull did not want you to realize. This is not just a bad car. This is a car that is fundamentally broken. After 3 races, 6th in the championship, behind their own sister team. Up to 20 kilograms overweight. Losing more than half a second per lap before the race even starts. And here is the part that changes everything. The engine is not the main problem. The way the car uses it is. Which is why Red Bull and Ford are secretly testing something completely different. Not more power. A new way to control it. Because right now, the RB22 does not just lose performance. It loses it exactly when it matters most. End of straights. Overtakes. Race-defining moments. And if this new system works, Red Bull does not just fix the car. They change how performance is delivered in Formula 1. But if it does not, then this is not a recovery. It is the beginning of something much worse. Stay with me, because what Verstappen really revealed goes far deeper than anyone expected. Subscribe now, because this story is just getting started. At first, Red Bull believed they understood the problem. That is what makes this so much worse. Because everything pointed in the same direction. Less power. Less efficiency. Less performance on the straights. Simple. Fix the engine. But the moment Verstappen got in the car, that theory started to break. Because what he felt did not match the data. The issue was not constant. It was not everywhere. It appeared and disappeared. Corner to corner. Lap to lap. And that is when the engineers realized something was wrong. Not with the engine itself, but with how the entire car was behaving around it. Because the RB22 is not just inefficient. It is inconsistent. The aerodynamics change depending on ride height. The floor loses downforce outside a very narrow window. The suspension cannot keep the car stable through high-speed sections. And all of that feeds directly into the engine. Because when the car becomes unstable, the driver lifts. When the driver lifts, energy recovery changes. When energy recovery changes, the entire deployment plan collapses. And suddenly, what looked like an engine problem is actually a chain reaction. But this is where the situation becomes even more uncomfortable. Because Red Bull discovered something that should not happen. Teams using the same engine are performing better. Extracting more top speed. More consistency. More usable power. Which means one thing. The RB22 is not just underperforming. It is wasting performance. And that is the real reason behind the secret Ford test. Because now, they are not trying to make the engine stronger. They are trying to make the system coherent. To make sure the power that exists actually reaches the track. At the right moment. In the right way. But this is where Verstappen's role becomes critical. Because he is the first one to feel when that chain breaks. The first one to notice when the car stops responding. The first one to realize that something deeper is wrong. And that is why his words matter so much. Because when he says the car is unpredictable, he is not talking about comfort. He is talking about control. Because without control, there is no confidence. And without confidence, there is no performance. But this is where everything takes another turn. Because Red Bull is not just dealing with one issue. They are dealing with a combination. Overweight. Aerodynamic instability. Energy inefficiency. Outdated development tools like the oldest wind tunnel on the grid. Each one manageable on its own. But together, they amplify each other. And that is why progress has been so slow. Because fixing one area exposes another. Improving balance reveals energy problems. Fixing energy exposes aerodynamic limitations. And that creates a loop. A cycle that keeps the car from ever becoming complete. But this is where the secret engine test becomes something much bigger. Because it is not just about the engine anymore. It is about breaking that cycle. Creating a system that stabilizes everything else. A foundation. Where energy delivery is predictable. Where the driver can trust the car again. Where performance does not disappear without warning. And that is what Red Bull is chasing right now. Not speed. Stability. Because if they achieve that, everything else becomes easier. But if they do not, then nothing else will matter. Because you cannot build performance on top of chaos. And that is the position Red Bull is in right now. Trying to turn a car that fights itself into a car that works as one. And the real question is, can they fix the system before the system breaks everything else around it? Because now, Red Bull is no longer trying to improve the RB22. They are trying to understand it. And that is a much more dangerous position to be in. Because in Formula 1, understanding always comes before performance. And right now, they do not have it. Not completely. Because every time they think they are close, the car behaves differently. A setup that works on Friday fails on Sunday. A balance that feels stable in one corner breaks in the next. And that is what Verstappen is really describing. Not a slow car. An unpredictable one. But here is where the situation becomes even more critical. Because unpredictability does not just affect lap time. It destroys development. Because if you cannot repeat behavior, you cannot measure improvement. And if you cannot measure improvement, you cannot move forward. You are guessing. And that is exactly where Red Bull is right now. Guessing. But this is where the secret engine test becomes something even more important. Because it is not just about performance. It is about creating a reference point. Something stable. Something consistent. Something the engineers can rely on. Because if they can stabilize how energy is delivered, if they can make the engine predictable, then suddenly, everything else becomes easier to read. Aerodynamics, suspension, balance, all of it becomes clearer. And that is the real objective. Not speed. Clarity. But here is where the risk reaches its highest level. Because if this new system does not bring that clarity, then Red Bull is left with nothing to anchor the car. No stable foundation. No reliable behavior. Just a collection of problems interacting with each other. And that is almost impossible to fix mid-season. But this is where the pressure shifts completely. Because now, it is no longer just about engineers solving a problem. It is about time running out. Because while Red Bull is still trying to understand, Mercedes already does. Ferrari already does. And that means every race, the gap is not just maintained. It grows. Because development is not linear. It compounds. And right now, Red Bull is on the wrong side of that curve. But this is where everything connects back to Verstappen. Because he is the one living this in real time. Feeling every inconsistency. Every unpredictable moment. Every lap where the car refuses to behave. And that is why his message matters so much. Because when a driver like him stops asking for more performance and starts asking for understanding, it means the situation has already gone too far. But this is where the story reaches its most important point. Because Red Bull now faces a decision. Do they continue pushing this concept, hoping to finally unlock it? Or do they accept That the foundation itself might be wrong? And that is not just a technical decision. It is a strategic one. Because changing direction now means sacrificing the season. But not changing might cost them even more. Because if the concept is flawed, every upgrade built on top of it only makes the problem deeper. And that is the line they are walking between persistence and reset. But this is where everything builds toward one final moment. Not in the factory. Not in simulation. On track. Because when this new engine behavior finally appears, when the RB22 runs with this system under real conditions, everything will become clear. Not gradually. Instantly. Because either the car stabilizes, or it does not. Either the system works, or it exposes everything. And the real question is, when that moment arrives, will Red Bull finally understand the car they built? Or will they realize they have been trying to fix something that was never fully understood from the beginning? And this is where everything finally reaches the point Red Bull cannot escape. Because there is one moment in every failed concept where the team stops asking how to fix it and starts asking if it can be fixed at all. And Red Bull is dangerously close to that moment. Because up to now, there was always an explanation. The engine is new. The regulations are new. The data is still coming in. But those explanations are starting to run out. Because 3 races have already shown the same pattern. Not improvement. Repetition. The same instability. The same energy loss. The same inability to use the car at its full potential. And that is where everything changes. Because when a problem repeats, it is no longer a phase. It is a limitation.